welcome to another Hayley-Roxanna crafts video. In all the videos I have done on cross stitching so far, I have stitched on Aida fabric. But in this video I'm going to show you how to cross stitch on Evenweave fabric, and I will also do a little comparison between the Aida and the Evenweave fabric so that you know what the differences are. Little disclaimer before we start, I have never actually completed a project on Evenweave fabric before. Although I do know the theory on how to stitch on Evenweave, which is what I'm actually going to share with you in the next couple of videos. And I've actually got some projects now ready to do for myself using Evenweave fabric. So these next couple of videos are actually as much to help me with my cross stitching on Evenweave as they are to show you how to do it. So let's start by looking at the differences between Aida fabric and Evenweave fabric. So here we have a piece of Aida fabric and a piece of Evenweave fabric. So if we take the Aida fabric first, okay, you can see it's made up of squares, and this is done by 5 threads being weaved in both directions of the fabric, and you get 4 clearly visible holes in each corner of the square. And the size of these squares determines the count of the fabric, and by count we literally just mean how many squares there are per inch of fabric. So this is 14 count Aida, as there are 14 squares per inch of fabric. Aida fabric is also quite stiff. If we take the piece of Evenweave fabric, you can see this also has sort of grid layout, so there are squares. But with an Evenweave, this is achieved by evenly spacing threads in both directions. Hence it's called Evenweave fabric. But again, the size of the squares that are formed by this determine the count of the fabric. So this is a 28 count Evenweave, as there are 28 squares per inch of fabric. Due to the way that you stitch on Evenweave, if you were to stitch the same picture on the 14 count Aida and the 28 count Evenweave, the actual finished picture would be the same size. So likewise, if you were using a 16 count Aida, the equivalent would be a 32 count Evenweave, and the equivalent to an 18 count Aida would be a 36 count Evenweave. Evenweave fabric is also a lot more supple and softer than the Aida fabric, but this also means that it does tend to fray more easily. However, you can prevent fraying on the Evenweave fabric in the same way that you can prevent fraying on your Aida fabric. So you could cut it with pinking shears, you could use masking tape on the edges, you could stitch the edges, or you could use a seam sealant product. Alternatively, you could deliberately fray the edges to make it part of the project. So how do you decide which fabric to stitch on? Generally, Aida fabric would be better for beginners, as it's easier to see where you're stitching, as the squares and holes are much more easily defined, particularly for the different ways that you stitch on the two fabrics. But Evenweave, as it's a finer fabric, it can actually give the finished product a more refined look. But like with most things with cross stitching, which one you decide to use can come down to just personal preference for what you're stitching and what you're going to do with your finished cross stitch and how you want it to look. So now we know what Evenweave fabric is, we can look at how to cross stitch on it. But first we need to choose what needle to use. Now, like when you're stitching on Aida fabric, you would use a tapestry needle. So a tapestry needle has a blunter end than a normal sewing needle, and it also has a slightly larger eye. Now, as we've discussed in previous videos, tapestry needles come in different sizes, And the size that you want to use is partly determined by personal preference, but also it's determined by the count of the fabric that you are stitching on. So for 14 count Aida fabric and 28 count Evenweave, a size 24 needle is recommended. For 16 count Aida and 32 count Evenweave, a size 26 needle is recommended. And for 18 count Aida and 36 count Evenweave, a size 28 needle is recommended. As I'm going to be stitching on 28 count Evenweave, I have a size 24 needle, which I am going to thread up with some thread. So I have threaded up one strand of thread doubled up, as I'm going to be doing a loop start. So this is like stitching with 2 strands of thread. The pattern generally tells you how many strands you need to be using, but this is what I'm going with at the moment. So on Aida fabric, when you do just a normal standard cross stitch, you go hole to hole. So I go from bottom left to top right, and then when I'm crossing it back, I go bottom right to top left. Okay, just like that. So when I'm stitching on Evenweave, as I'm using 28 count Evenweave, which is equivalent to the 14 count Aida, to make stitches, cross stitches this size, I need to stitch over 2 threads. Okay, so I'll show you what that means. So you come up wherever it is you are starting through your hole, just like you do when you're stitching on Aida. As I'm doing that loop start, I just need to be careful I don't pull the thread all the way through. But like so. And then instead of going down the next hole diagonally, I'm going to go to the one after that. So it's over 2, and just pass my needle through there. And I'm just going to turn my material over and catch the loop at the end of my thread just to secure it. Pull that through like so. It's there. Now to do the cross back over, I'm not going to go through the hole directly below where I've just gone down. I need to go down 2 holes. Pull that through and I will just show you. So the hole directly below where I went down before is there, and I've gone into the next hole down from that. And then again, you don't want to go into the middle hole, you need to go down the next one over, like so. And there's my cross, which is the same size as the crosses on my 14 count Aida. You do need to be careful when you are stitching on the Evenweave, as the thread that makes up the fabric tends to move more easily. You do need to be a little bit gentler when you're pulling your needle through, just to avoid moving the fabric. But if I was to stitch a row of crosses on here, I will show you. So I will just go to the side of this, to there. If I was going to do a row, so say 4 stitches, I wouldn't go down that hole, I need to go down the next one. So I'm going across the 2 to there, and across to there, like so, down. So you're almost treating it like your square is made up of a little sort of block of 9 holes to make the one square. Okay, down there. So I've just done 3, that will do. And so coming back, I will go there to there, across to there. Again, when you are doing your cross stitches, you don't have to do them the same way as me. You might prefer to travel your cross stitches this way first and then cross back the other way. absolutely fine. Again, just like when you're stitching on Aida fabric, as long as all your crosses are going in the same direction, it's not important which way you go in. Okay, like so. So there's a little row of crosses. Okay, you can also stitch over one thread on your even weave fabric. This is generally done when the pattern requires you to do a petite stitch. Okay, so if I'm going to do over one, just find the hole to come up, pull it through like so, and go down into the next hole, just like you would when you're stitching on the Aida, instead of going across the two. And then you come up through the hole beneath the one where you went down, and then just cross your stitch back over like so. As you can see, that gives you a much smaller cross, and you can repeat that next to it. Like so. And I can even do two underneath. Two, and then just cross those back. And then you can see that with the petite stitches, you can actually get 4 crosses in the same space as you would one of your normal sized crosses. Okay, and this can be done to create different effects, more detail in your work. Petite stitches can be done on Aida fabric, but obviously it would be a lot harder, as you would have to pierce the squares of fabric in order to divide the one square up into the 4 to make the 4 little crosses. So if you were working on a pattern with petite stitches in it, this is where working on even weave fabric may be a benefit. So that's an introduction to cross stitching on even weave fabric. I'll put some links below to some of the products that I have used in this video. And if you've got any questions or want to share any tips for cross stitching on even weave fabric, please pop them in the comments below. In the next video, I will show you how to do partial stitches on even weave fabric, so your 1/4 and 3/4 stitches. So until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye!